My name is Carrie Damon. I'm from MaRS Discovery District, and I'd like to welcome you to this best practices session with our speaker Julie Mitchell, who's going to speak on creating an exceptional brand. These best practices sessions are brought to you by, with the generous support of CIBC and additional support by the William and Nona Heaslip Foundation. So we're very grateful to our sponsors. I'll just do a couple words of introduction to Julie Mitchell. I think she's going to talk a little bit more about her background during her presentation. But she started her career in, well, first she did an English communications degree at McGill, and then she started her career in marketing and communication design at the Toronto design firm Spencer Francie Peters. She also worked for sort of notable marketing organizations, Watt International and The Body Shop. About 1999, she decided to branch out on her own and she became a marketing consultant. And in 2003, she started her own design firm called Parcel Design, Inc., which I think she'll speak a lot about today with some of the cool cutting-edge branding that she's done there. Parcel Design was one of Canada's hot 50 emerging growth companies named by Profit Magazine in 2006. So Julie is also a volunteer advisor here at MaRS, so she works with some of our client startup companies. So I'd just like to welcome Julie Mitchell.
Thank you. Thanks, Carrie. So does this work if I'm, is the microphone on me or is it, okay, we're good. All right, well, thank you. One thing that I like to do before I get started is I actually have a couple questions for the people in the audience. So I know I have some competitors here in the front row, so thanks guys for coming. And I just want to get a feel for what other people do. Do we have any emerging entrepreneurs in the room? Fantastic, good. And anyone who works in marketing communications currently? Great, okay, so I need to be on my toes for sure, that's half the room. So I'm going to cover some basic principles for what to help you create an exceptional brand. When you think about branding, what are some of those words that come to mind? So logos, for example, is one. What else?
Emotion.
Emotion, perfect. Wasn't expecting that one. What else?
Image.
Image.
Reputation.
Reputation. Engagement. Values. Okay, so all of these things. And it really can be quite overwhelming when you think about, well, how am I going to carve a niche out for myself? What is your starting point? What do you do to really get yourself on the right foot? And I believe that there are three very simple principles that you can follow. And I'm going to write those down because these are, if there's one thing that I want you to remember, it's these three words. Hopefully I'm going to spell them right. Okay, so three guiding principles to help you create your brand. Sorry, this is just repeating the same message. Now we're actually in the act of creating an exceptional brand. So what I want to do is actually tell you a little bit about me so you have a context here. I've been working in the business for about 15 years now. I've been an entrepreneur for 10 of those years, and it all started. It was very interesting. We talked about this dramatic change for me in 1999. And in 1999, I like to say I was fired because it sounds very dramatic. I was technically restructured, which is the nice way of saying that someone is no longer essential at an organization. I was working for The Body Shop, and I was working in the marketing department there. I'd been there for a couple of years, and I was really enjoying the work that I was doing, but we went through one of those tests where you're identified for your strengths and your weaknesses and how do you work with the team. And And I just didn't do very well on the tests. And what I was told was that I was a bit of a cowboy and that I probably was more suited to a more independent environment. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. And shortly after that, we had a restructure and I got the news that my position had been eliminated. I think the real story there was that I was hired as a consultant and they had these pay grades, and depending on what you did and how many people reported to you and et cetera, you were slotted into this pay grade. But because I had been hired as a consultant initially and then brought on full time, my pay was out of whack for the grids. So what I did back in 1999 was I went to my boss, who was Margot Franson, the woman that brought the body shop to Canada, and I said, these are my projects that I think will be challenging for you to fill in the short term. So I gave them a proposal for all the things I loved about my job, for doing them externally, and my proposal was accepted, and I continued to work on those projects for 6 or 7 years, really until the body shop was bought by L'Oreal. So it was a great start for me. I had this one fantastic client. Every time I went up to the body shop, I would meet former colleagues who would say, oh, I'm working on something and I could really use some help on this. So it was a great way to kick off my career. For about the next 4 years, while I was working for the body shop, picking up some other contract work, I was also subcontracted by ad agencies and design firms in the city. And those were actually my most lucrative years. I had a lot of flexibility. I really was enjoying the variety of work. But what I learned during that time was that there was a different way that I could do business, and that what I wanted to do was learn from some of the negative experiences I was having working at some of these bigger agencies, and I wanted to come up with a way to create a communications firm that, that reflected my values and what I wanted in a day-to-day environment. So I'll talk to you a bit later about how we're doing that. So these 3 principles were something that I was very aware of when I started my company, so I had the advantage of recognizing the value of simplicity, consistency, and clarity. Clarity is probably the most difficult of the 3 principles to implement and to live up to, because what might be clear in your mind is not clear to everyone else, and you feel like you know exactly what you do, and someone asks you what you do, and you tell them, and then they walk away and they actually don't know what it is that you do. So we're going to talk about that. One of the things that when it comes to simplicity, I like to refer to my own brand, because my brand is actually a single color logo, and it's using a design font, but a fairly typical font. It's Mrs. Eve's, and I'll just show you. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I'm slightly getting ahead of myself here. Before I talk about that, I just want to cover the notion of clarity. When you start your business, you actually don't really know how it's going to evolve over the years. And for me, when I started Parcel, my big idea was that I wanted to merge graphic design with promotional or custom branded product. And I felt that there was a void out there. When you were looking at custom branded product, everything is very generic, and it all feels like it's off the shelf, made in China. It's pretty not the best quality. So we came up with this fantastic line of really interesting customized products. This is an example of one of my first products. The idea here is that these graphics on the top would be customized for the client. You could align the color of the candy to that client, and I thought this was a fantastic idea. So I put together a couple of products, and I went out and I sold some of these products to different clients. And then when it came to the fulfillment, we did this in my home for the first year. So this was my best-selling product that year, and I sold this to maybe 7 clients, and we did a total of, for 7 clients, maybe 250 of these. But when you look at this, it feels like it's a really nice compact item, but when you're putting together 250 of them in your small semi-detached home in Riverdale, it's not really so. So I had people in my place and they had plastic gloves on and we had boxes everywhere and candy everywhere, and I had all sorts of problems. The candy company wouldn't deliver because we weren't a recognized business address, and we were, I had to go and load up the stuff in my own car. And so my husband comes home the first day that we're doing this and he says, so this is your idea for your new business? This is what we're going to be doing at home? And I said, no, I'm never doing this again. This was, I thought it was a great idea. So the following year, what happened was I got a call from someone who had received our gift, and that was someone who worked at the loyalty group. And she said, I love that gift. I want to order that for Christmas. I want 750 of them. And I said, well, how about if I come and talk to you about what else I can do? She said, great, come on in. So we went in, met with her. She loved all of our products. She felt that it really was different than what she was seeing out there in the typical world of premiums and incentives. And then she said, but I want 750 of those. So we did it. I hired a fulfillment company, and we managed to fill that order. So for probably 4 years in my business, I really struggled with these two very different products. One was the physical, tangible, promotional goods, and the other was the brand strategy, communication design work. What I started to notice was that my time was really being divided because the customer was different for the product work. The sales cycle was different. There's a lot that can go wrong when you're putting together thousands of these things in your warehouse, which we did up until recently. And the bigger thing for me was that my heart was aligned with the branding work that we were doing. I found it more strategic, I found it more engaging, and it was really hard for me to say no and to focus. But when I thought about my own beliefs about branding and what we're doing, I wasn't really focused enough, and I didn't really have clarity. And people would send me notes and say, oh, I just wanted to let you know I referred you to so-and-so for some tchotchkes. And I'd get those notes and I'd be mad. And I'd think, that's not what we do. It's, it's more interesting and it's more thoughtful than that. So really what we needed to do was let go of this side of our business. And I'm telling you that story because for the emerging entrepreneurs in the room, your idea of what you're doing now, you might be completely convinced that that is the track that you were on, but there will be things that happen in the next couple of years that might derail your thinking, your ideas, and get you moving towards a new idea. And that brings us back to simplicity. If you start with a brand that's very simple visually and simple in terms of its promise, forget about taglines and forget about gradations and complex design flourishes. If you start with something that's really simple, it will grow with you as your business evolves and changes, because I can guarantee that your business will evolve and change. So what I wanted to show you before was my own brand, Parcel, and the story I've explained. And for this type of product, the name Parcel worked really well. It does not work as well for our communication design services, but trying to be clever about it, I don't want to have a name change. And the way that I've explained it or rationalized our name for the communication design side is that we are part of that parcel that gets exported. So when you're looking at the foundation for your business and you need the communication design services, you parcel out that work because it typically isn't something that's under your own umbrella. So it didn't work quite as well for the communication work that we do, but it certainly suited the product work. So this building here is my studio. And as you can see, it looks a little grim. And it looks grim here because this building had been vacant for about 12 years before I bought it. When I live in this neighborhood, this is in the Leslieville neighborhood, so I would drive by this building, and for quite a while there was a for sale sign on it. And I thought, oh, I wonder what that's like. And I was driving by one day with my husband, and I said, I think I'm going to go see that building. And he ignored me. And then I took that as a good sign. And so I made an appointment with the selling agent. I went to see the building, and it was what you would expect. Kind of looked like this. I like to call this the powder room. And it was a pretty huge project to take on for someone who was trying to build their business. But I had a vision for this building, and sorry, that's the old one again. And this was my vision for the building, and this is what it looks like now. So you can see it's quite a change, and it took more than just a coat of paint. And when I was going through that decision to purchase this building, I relied on, I'm part of another great tip for anyone who is an entrepreneur. There's an organization called EO, which is the Entrepreneurs Organization, which I am part of, and I found it incredibly valuable in terms of having a kind of an informal advisory board for building your business. So I presented my idea to buy this building and fix it up, and my group said, worst idea ever, do not do this. It's going to take your focus away from your business. You're going to spend way more money than you think. And they had all sorts of reasons, logical reasons why this didn't make sense. And I thought about that and decided, well, I'm going to do it anyway. So I told my husband that I wanted to do this, and Derek said, he actually incorporated some swearing, but he said, there is no way that you are buying that building, so get it out of your mind. You're not doing it. And I thought, okay, well, okay. And I kept working on this, and I actually didn't have enough funding to do this on my own. So what I needed was an investor. And it's kind of funny, but I ended up calling my husband's boss at the time and told him about this idea, and he's a developer, and he said, well, let me take a look at it. And then a couple weeks later, he said, Julie, it's a gem. You got to do it. Put an offer in. Let's get it. So we put an offer in. It took us a year to fix it up, but we've been in this space for 3 years now. And it's been fantastic for us on a number of fronts. One is that it's on a main artery in the East End, so our brand recognition has really skyrocketed. We've had a lot of business inquiries simply because people are driving by and curious about what we do. And what was really satisfying for me was that it became an example of how simple branding really can pave the way for continuity in the applications, and it doesn't hold you back. So our identity, in addition to wrapping around this the building, before the building, it also wrapped around our business cards. And because it is that single unit, that's one color, it's transportable, it's easy to apply in any format. When it's in black and white, it looks really great. So these are all things that you want to keep in mind. When you're looking at your own brand, think about what does it look like when it's distilled down to its most elemental format. So if it's in black and white, if it's in a digital format, if it's being printed on a lousy printer, how are those things going to impact what your brand looks like? And if you go through that exercise, what you'll come back with is that the simpler your brand is, the better it's going to be for you, and the easier it will be for you to live with that brand long term. It's so funny, I bring all these notes and then I don't follow my notes, but I'm going to try to go back to finding my place. Well, one of the other things I always find interesting with brands is often you'll find yourself in a position where you're sponsoring an event, or where your brand is on a long list of brands that are shown on the back of a trade show, for example. And that's a really good format to explore that kind of worst case scenario for what your brand is going to look like, is when someone else is controlling your brand, what are they going to do with it? And what you want to do is you want to limit the number of variables there, because that's going to impact the consistency that your brand has. So it's a lot easier to start out thinking about how you build your brand, as opposed to a few years down the road going back and trying to fix it. A lot of our clients come to us and they're looking to fix their brands because they've got multiple communication pieces, nothing matches. They're using fonts that are on their communication materials, their external communication materials that are different than their internal font systems, and everything just starts to feel like a dog's breakfast. So if you spend the time and you allocate some of your funding to getting it right when you start, it's just going to make things easier for you in the long run. Okay, so we've talked about simplicity and consistency, and now I'd like to spend some time talking about clarity, because clarity is a tricky one. It's an ongoing process. It's not something that you do once and it's forever written in stone. When you're thinking about brand clarity, you really need to reflect on your core messages and how you're living up to that promise every day. And there's a great tool, and I'm going to give you copies of this, that we've developed for helping you define that clarity. And I'm just going to hand this out. This is something that we have developed internally. It's called a brand map, and this is the foundation of that brand map process. So earlier when I asked what are some of those ideas that come to mind, you said emotion, and we think about brand and identity first in terms of its visual application, but what's more critical is what's at the soul of your company, and defining what that soul is, and defining the ways that you're going to live up to that soul or promise for your company. It's not something that can happen organically. One of the things that in my business that's really important to me is I want to make sure that we are treating our suppliers with respect, and that's fairly generic. Anyone can say we want to treat our suppliers with respect, we want them to be partners, and unless you have tactics that allow you to live up to that promise, it then is just something that you say you do, but you might not actually do it because you might believe it, but if your employees don't know that you believe that, or that you have ways built into the way that you do business that show that you respect your suppliers, it's not going to happen. So for us, what we did was, we all know about CRM programs and customer relationship management, and how do you do that? Well, we developed our own little play on that, which we called SRM, which is a supplier relationship management program. And what we did is every quarter, we take a look at our supplier list and we reflect on the projects that we've done and who's really helped us out. And we thank those suppliers, and we thank them with something that is a token gift. So it might be something like the candy caddy that I showed earlier, or some kind of a treat that they can share with their colleagues. But we've made this a program that we do. We keep it on our status report. We update it so we know when it's coming up, when we're going to do it, and we make sure that we live up to it. Because again, for me to say we respect our suppliers is kind of meaningless, but what are those things that you can do in your business to really live up to that? So the map that I've given out, I'm going to just explain how this works. So what we find is that a lot of companies trade or do business or promote their expected capabilities. So when you think about what you do, you might say, well, I'll relate it to my own business. So we're a communication design firm. You expect that we understand branding, that we're good designers, that we're capable project managers. You expect all that. So why would I promote that to you? Because if I didn't offer that, I wouldn't be in business. So one of the things that we often see companies doing, especially in the early days, is they talk about things like customer service. We really believe in customer service. Well, you know what? Customer service, it's an expected capability, and if you don't have that down, you're not going to survive. So what we want to do is encourage our clients to think beyond this level to get to, well, why is someone really working with us? And to get to this level, it's actually a little bit personal. So 15 years ago, this is kind of an evolution of mission statements and brand promises and value statements. And you used to see companies would have their, we are committed to customer service. You'd see it written up in their lobbies or on the back of their business cards and on their websites. And it doesn't really resonate because you're not actually getting a feel for the way that that company does business, and you're not able to get past what it is you're expecting them to do. I'm not saying all mission statements are like that, but I find that a number of them are. So in order to get us to this level, to something that's a little bit more emotional, to something that is going to resonate and connect us with our customers, we go through a series of questions. So it's hard to differentiate values and personality. What's the difference between these two? The easiest way to think about this is that your personality is the kind of outward immediate response that people have to your business, and the values characteristics is something that they discover once they've done business with you. So one of the things in my own company, and I can use this as an example because it's an easy one for me, is that our personality, when you meet us, is that we're excited and we're engaged in the work. Once you work with us, what you come to see is that we're actually really dedicated to the work that we do. We care about the outcome for our clients, and we don't drop the ball. I've worked in places, I mentioned earlier, wanting to not do what I had seen other firms do. And I saw advertising firms that were often really focused on the win, and they could be so charming in the early stages of trying to get your business. And once it was in the door, they didn't really care what happened beyond that because they were then focused on the next win. So that defined for me, reinforced what my values were, what my character was, and that's something that we really strive to live up to in our business. So for us, when it came to the why us, people weren't hiring us because the work looked nice. Of course the work looked nice. Of course we were good at project management. They came to us because they felt that sense of inspiration. And when you come into our studio, when you take a look at the work that we're doing, when you talk to us, you feel like we're engaged and inspired every day. So we want to make sure that that comes through in our communication with our clients. So for us, the core message that we're delivering is that we are engaging with clients so that they are inspired to take their brands to the next level. And when it comes to how we do business, this is an internal thing. So for us, this is the rituals, the ways that you do business beyond that kind of primary service that you're providing. So for us, if it's communication design, some of the ways that we do business are, I mentioned our supplier recognition program earlier. We also are working on a professional development program within our studio. We're a small group, there's 8 of us. But in order to make sure that we're living up to that why us and that we're inspired every day, we want to make sure that we really are inspired and engaged. So we have this development program that we're doing with our internal staff. We want to make sure that our clients are engaged. So we send thank you, or most companies send out Christmas gifts or Christmas cards, and it's kind of ho-hum. You sort of expect that you're going to get those cards, and you don't really feel excited when you get those cards. So what we want to do is forget about the traditional client cocktail parties and holiday gifts that you get, and do something that is a little bit more engaging. So for us, we've got a bit of a program that we've planned for the year. So in the spring, we're having a lunch that we're inviting our clients to, and we're asking our clients to bring a guest. And the guest is one person that they work with, that they find inspiring to work with. So that could be a coworker, could be their boss, it could be a supplier, or it could be a client. We don't care. We're not doing it because we want to try to sell our services to that person that they bring. We're doing it because we like doing stuff like that. We want to engage our clients. We want them to have fun and feel inspired in the day-to-day work that they do. Another thing that we did was at Christmas time, in previous years, and this is why I'm saying this is an ongoing process. It might not. It's something that's constantly developing. So for me, it's ongoing and it changes as we go. So at Christmas time, instead of having that annual holiday party, what we decided to do was invite our 18 clients that we enjoyed working with, that we had worked with in the past 6 to 8 months. We invited them to a professional portrait day. And we had a fantastic response. And it was a gift, but it was a gift that they would enjoy. It provided us the opportunity to connect with our clients. It showed that we were thinking differently. So it was a great example of living our own brand and our own why. And the response was fantastic. And then the center pillar here, the tactics to get the word out. So this is where you get into the nitty-gritty. Is it a new identity? Is it a website? Or is it something that's a little bit unusual? So for us in my company, it's about community engagement. So I try to do talks like this. We try to make sure that we're connected with the emerging talent. We participate in an internship program, but we also really work to make sure that internship program is rewarding for those who participate. So they're not showing up at Parcel for 12 weeks and doing nothing, because often that's what happens. They come in and you haven't really thought about how you can use them. You just hope that if you're busy, they're going to be there. And I don't want someone sitting at a desk for 12 weeks. I want them to feel like they have a sense of how this company operates. So for us, that's a really important link to our why, which is, again, being inspired every day. So when it comes to how this would apply to your business, I'll give you one example. I've got a couple of examples, but I'll share one with you right now. I'm going to pass this around. This stuff is easier to touch and feel than to see, but I'll tell you about this client. This is a small business. It's an independent bakery located on the Danforth. And the woman that owns this bakery has big plans for the bakery. She bought this existing bakery. Her plan is to perfect it and then roll it out and have a fantastic franchise business in Canada. It's called Sweet Tooth. And one of her big challenges that we discovered through going through this process and then also visiting her location is that there's something that's missing when you walk into her cafe. And what's missing is that smell of home-baked goodness. So you don't quite register it as a customer, but when you walk in, one of the questions that you ask is, do you bake on site, or what's your specialty? And they then have to say, oh, we don't bake anything on site. And then you kind of go, ooh, it doesn't really meet the expected capabilities of freshness, homemade, quality, because you don't really know what, where this stuff has come from. So what we needed to do was actually overcome this challenge that would typically just be part of what you would expect when you walked into that bakery. So we ended up developing a why for Sweet Tooth that was all around being a community tastemaker. So if Sweet Tooth was positioned to be the purveyor of the best in the community, then they could rationalize why their apple pies were not baked on the premises. They could talk about how their chocolate chip cookie was voted the best chocolate chip cookie in the community, because they would have tactics to allow them to live up to that. So we were able to take that overwhelming feeling that you have when you're trying to define what you need to do next, and what are some of those marketing tools that you're going to incorporate into your own business. Because for this particular client, if she ensured that her tactics were really rooted in this tastemaker positioning, then it was easy for her to say no to the ones that weren't. So, for example, she could hold a party and have a reason to hold that party. It could be about defining the best Nanaimo bar. Here's 4 that we've shortlisted. Come in and vote on what you think is the best, as opposed to, and I love their Nanaimo bars, so that might be something that would engage me. But if the alternative, and this is what we see a lot of small companies do, is they've got a little place where they say, give us your business card and we'll invite you to an event. And it kind of doesn't really feel like it feels like they want your information so they can start to send stuff to you, which probably they won't, because they don't actually have a plan to implement it. They just have this plan to collect cards. But for this company, what it did was it allowed her to filter what some of those events would be and allowed her to really underscore this, this tastemaker positioning that, that came out of this brand strategy session. Okay, so I'm going to summarize now, and then I can certainly take some questions. I've got some other examples of identities that reflect that simplicity, consistency, clarity, positioning. So I can hand those out as well, and you can have a look at some of those. There you go. Okay, so just to recap, simplicity allows you to create a brand that's really visually memorable and visually easy to apply to multiple applications. So simple color palettes, single color, two color, don't go crazy with your colors. Forget about gradations and don't have your identity created in a digital format. Often we start with creating an identity within the context of a website, but that doesn't translate well to print material. So think about it in that lowest form that we talked about, black and white, 1 inch in size. What does it look like? If you've got an identity and then there's a tagline that's associated with it, can you read that when it's shrunk down to 1 inch? Does it still look lovely if you see it in that simple black and white format? Another thing that I want to say is a lot of companies, when they start out, use their own name in their brand. So a friend of mine has a company called Hala Events, and her name's Hala. And we see that happen a lot because it's hard to come up with a name and you don't know what you're doing and you're working as a consultant. And the challenge with that is that if you see your business growing beyond yourself, then it's hard to separate yourself. So for Hala, anyone who's looking for Hala to organize an event wants Hala. They don't want Victoria, they want Hala. And that's something that becomes difficult for you to overcome if that's what you've positioned. I had a funny experience. One of my clients, I'm handing out some materials for Orbit Media, which is part of Astral. And I had a funny email this week from a client who wasn't the initial client, someone who came to the company after we had done this rebranding exercise. And he sent me a note and he said, oh, I have some changes that we need done to the site, and I just wanted to make sure that you were still at Parcel. And I love getting that email because he doesn't know that I own Parcel. So that means we're actually doing a great job of making sure that it's the team that's carrying the brand for us. So I wrote him back and I said, yes, I'm still at Parcel. I haven't left yet. And I didn't say, actually, I own the business. So that's my caution against brands that actually incorporate your own name. So again, related to simplicity, when we're talking about visual clarity, the simpler it is, the easier it is to apply. So we saw the great example of our brand applied to signage. Think about how you're going to transport that brand and see it live within the context of a trade show booth or on a package or in a print brochure or on a website. And keep in mind that the simpler it is, the easier it is to work with. It helps make you more nimble. So we talked about how it's very likely that your business proposition, your core services might change over time. So if you don't assign yourself to a specific product or service by a tagline or by a name that's too limiting, then your brand can grow with you. And then when we talk about clarity, we want to make sure that you've got a well-articulated brand strategy. You've got copies of that brand map. That's the way that we do it. It works very well for our clients. And I invite you to use that as a tool as you're starting to define your own clarity in your business. It makes it a filter for how you do business. So earlier I talked about Sweet Tooth. And one of the things that the tastemaker positioning does for that business is it means that when they're hiring staff to work the counter at that bakery, it's not about having experience working a cash or having worked with food before. It's actually about being passionate about food and understanding the difference between real chocolate chips and those waxy, crappy chocolate chips. And that's something that they need to make sure that they're doing. And that then is a way that you can make your why or your brand actually help you in terms of some of your operational decisions. Do you have a question for me? Okay.
You talked a little bit earlier about not using your own name in a brand. Can you talk a little bit about when you have a word in a brand, like you have the word parcel in your brand, how significant is it that it be evocative of what you do? I mean, you talked about that a little bit. I guess I'm just curious to know how much a brand needs to, or the word in a brand needs to relate to what your company actually is. Like, FedEx is derived from Federal Express, which implies delivery of something. But is that necessary, or is that a desirable thing?
I think there are some brands that are incredibly generic that make it difficult for you to start to build a story. So I have to think of something that doesn't exist right now, but Primal Solutions, or it seems to suggest an approach, but it doesn't actually have any meaning. And I think you want to stay away from something that is incredibly generic and doesn't really have any link to what it is you do. But you can also have a brand that has a loose link. So for example, my own brand, Parcel, it doesn't actually incorporate communication design services, but I can make it work because I'm not concerned about someone seeing my brand and immediately understanding what it is we do. And if you think about any big brand, that's often the case. I mean, Nike, for example, doesn't tell you anything specific. I mean, Nike is the goddess of competition or something along that lines, but the average person doesn't actually know that. It's the story behind that brand that gives you that picture of what Nike is about. So I think that your name doesn't have to explain what it is you do. I think your secondary communication does that job for you. But when I say that, at the same time, I want people to avoid those incredibly generic, business, I can't think of one, but those names that we see out there, Primal Solutions, Acme. But Acme is a great brand because it's a single word. One of the other things that comes up is don't worry about not being able to get that URL, because you're never going to get a single word URL today. There's going to be someone who is squatting on that name, and it's going to be really hard to get. So for me, there's no way I was going to get Parcel Design, and I was never going to be able to afford to buy that domain. So for us, it's parcel.com. So for us, it's parceldesign.com. And in your business, if the brand that you wanted and it was miraculously available and the brand was music, chances are you're not going to get music.com. But what you probably could get is listentomusic.com. Actually, that one you probably couldn't get. But you can create the URL and not worry that that specific domain is not one that's available for purchase.
Can you just repeat the questions back?
Sure. Okay. Question?
Oh, just related to that, I just wonder, how did you come up with your company's name to start with?
So the question is, how did I come up with my company's name? And the answer to that is that my company is actually hired to provide name generation. And what we do, we have a name generation process. So what we do is, because of my network within the marketing communications industry, I know lots of people who love to do this, and I typically would send out an email to a group of people, invite them to what is really a facilitated brainstorm session where we go through a number of exercises, often that have nothing to do with that final name that we come up with. That might be something that we do internally later. I didn't use that process for my own name. I took some shortcuts and spent some weekends thinking about it, and and ran the name by people, and they said, oh, I don't like that. But that's because it's more than just the name. It's about creating that brand, and it incorporates the visual and all the secondary communication pieces that go with it. So, yes.
For an entrepreneur, and I've worked for large companies as well, and I know the marketing and branding budgets are really huge, but for an entrepreneur starting out, where you know you've got a very thin budget, what are some of the very basic essentials that you could go to a design communication firm and say, you know, I'm starting out, I can't afford much, but this is what I have. What do we need to get started?
How much money do you need to get? What are the tools, the key tools? So the key tools that you need when you have a really limited budget.
The logo isn't obvious.
Yes, so I would say there's two levels to that. So there's defining the tools. When we look at that brand map and we talk about the tools to get the words out, there's a secondary level of tools. At a very basic level, the brand and a decent card are key. A website is absolutely essential. A website is the first place people go, and if you don't have a website, it doesn't really feel like you're credible. So you absolutely need a website. If you started talking to firms about how much a website costs, you're going to get responses that are anywhere from $2,500 to, depending on what you're trying to do, $25,000. And the reality is that's going to be based on whether that site is a vanity site. So what I mean by a vanity site is a site that's really a place that people go to find more information about you, your product, your services, versus a site that is a little bit more complex, that has that, whether it's e-com. You can do e-com pretty inexpensively now as well, but if it's about engagement and interaction, or having visual and audio clips on it, that starts to get a little bit more complicated. So a website, I'd say, is definitely one of those key tools. And if you're looking at a vanity site, and it's for a small company that's a startup, you're looking at anywhere between $5,000 and $7,500 to get that design, to get the writing right, and to get that programmed. And that's an elemental website. I'm not talking about something that's overly complex. Yes? Right.
How does it know when to
well, so the question is, how does a company know that it's time to refresh and change their identity? And the answer really is it depends on that company. I can speak to smaller organizations because I think this group is typically from a smaller business than Bell or New York Times. A good sign is when you're feeling like there's a disconnect between what you do and what your communication materials say that you do. When you feel like you're not happy with the materials that you're handing out, so if you've got sell sheets and you're making apologies for those sell sheets, and you're saying, you know, this is actually more updated than what it is right now, or, you know, I'm going to give you two, but this one was designed by a different designer, so I'm sorry that they look different. So if you're making any apologies about your materials, if you're handing out your business card and you don't feel proud to hand that business card out, I think that's a good sign. And if you're generally feeling overwhelmed by the different directions that you can go in and what some of those marketing tactics are, that's time for you to get some help as well.
You mentioned that it's a creative company where creativity it's a product or a service.
Well, there's something I didn't talk about today, and that's a secondary palette. So a secondary palette can be a place where you define a range of colors that are going to live on the different materials that you have. Whether it's a creative company or not, color is one way to express creativity, but I don't think that it's required that a company that's in a creative field incorporate multiple colors. And I'm saying one color, I mean 1 color, 2 color, 3 color, those are great, but what you want to watch out for is if a designer gives you a beautiful metallic silver and or an emboss, which is a kind of a textured feel into the paper, those are great, but what is the reality of the cost, and how are you going to replicate metallic silver in digital formats? And what about when you need something printed and you don't want to spend a lot of money on it? Digital, actually, you can print with metallic inks in some digital applications, but some of those flourishes end up holding you back and start to break down that consistency that you're looking for. So I believe simple is better.
Thanks.
Yes?
Can you transfer a brand, say, a very simple brand like what you have on the screen right now, just the orange with the black?
Okay, so the question is, when you develop an identity, how do you then take that and transfer it to the other pieces? And my answer to that is that you shouldn't do it yourself, that you should hire whatever's in your budget. I mean, there are a lot of very capable graphic designers who work on a freelance basis that can help you with that. What you want to do is not be stuck with something that's not going to translate easily. So you want to make sure that the colors, when you're looking at a print color, that color is going to be very different in application. And people see, to me, this looks orange, but this is actually red. But in this room, because of the lighting that we have, because of whatever the technology that we're using, that color can change a little bit. So, and that's going to happen, and we see it happening more and more because there are so many different ways that we can print something that a brand lives in multiple applications. So you don't really want to be too tied to a color or to a very specific shade of a color, because you're going to see that variance. Any other questions? Linda?
Really generic taglines in today's
Okay. So I think taglines are actually great. What I don't like is taglines that are tied to an identity. So for example, TELUS uses a tagline called, I don't know if they use it anymore, but the future is friendly. And that tagline works really well as a signature or as a piece that is applied sparingly. But sometimes what happens, and this is particularly typical of startups, is the tagline needs to be linked exactly to the core brand in every application. And I'll give you one example. A client that we're doing some work with right now is Royal LePage. And they have this new tagline, and it's "Helping you is what we do." And it's a great tagline, and it makes sense as long as they have those tactics defined that demonstrate how they're going to live up to that. Because you can imagine, like there's all sorts of jokes about helping you is what we don't do, and it's really easy to poke holes in that. But what we're doing right now with Royal LePage is getting them to make sure that that identity is not a required component to that core identity, to their core brand. Because particularly for Royal LePage, when they're dealing with, they've got real estate agents, and then they've got brokerage offices, and then they've got different commercial offering, and then the residential offering, and then when you have all these elements, and then you also have to build in this "helping you is what we do" tagline, it's a beast. So what we want to do is make sure that the taglines are thought through. So when we're looking at visual standards, we actually talk about where is that and when is that tagline appropriate for use. Yes.
Just coming back to brand identity as well as the taglines and tying it in with, how you're getting your message out. Is it your experience that having, for example, maybe it's a blessing in a way that you had to do parceldesigns.com, because what you do is design, and so to be found sort of in the search engine world.
Yes.
People may not type in parcel, but
right.
they may type in design. They're looking for a design firm, right? And did you find that that's helped you or hindered you? I mean,
I find for myself, I think about someone typing in design as the equivalent of someone 20 years ago opening up the yellow pages under graphic design firms, and that's not my client base.
Right.
So for me, that was never part of my strategy and doesn't need to be. It doesn't mean for someone else, it can be really critical that your name actually be a really easy access point to finding you. So for my own brand, not a concern. And for clients where it is a concern, there's all sorts of things that you can do, different strategies beyond just the name that you can do to make sure that you're easily found. Yes? The question is, I mentioned not having the logo be digitized. What I'm saying is don't have your logo created and approved in a digital format only. You want to think about that logo created for print before digital, because it might look really great in a digital format because you've got natural gradations and other more interesting effects when you're looking at digital that might not translate to a simple print application. So often what I see happen with startups is they design their website and their identity at the same time, and so it works really well in that web format, but it doesn't necessarily translate to some of the more basic pieces.
So is that just a keyword, or what's the terminology?
For the print piece, well, the technical terminology, if we're talking about color, would be that you define it as a Pantone, and then you can also define it as a digital equivalent. But there are various digital equivalents. So there's printing. I'm going to get too technical if I go into it, but I would say that you want to define your identity as a special or a Pantone or a PMS. Those are all the same thing. So you want to know what that is, because that's the one thing that you can translate to the other pieces or have the equivalent represented.
That builds a consistent brand, more consistency to the brand, or clarity or simplicity, I'm not sure, but they are not different things.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, can you have two different services that are doing different things and manage to get the consistency? And I think that's actually more a question about clarity. So as long as those two things that you do are clearly linked, that makes sense. When you start to, so for myself, when I started my business, I didn't want to give up one thing. I wanted to do these two things, and ultimately the decision that I came to was that one was hindering me. So I wanted that focus and clarity, and that's an issue for a lot of our clients. So I mentioned Sweet Tooth earlier, and she had this birthday program where she would work with businesses and get lists of all their staff and then have a birthday cake program. But the staff lists change so quickly, and how are you going to do that? And how do you know if someone's allergic to nuts and if they prefer chocolate? And so you want to make sure that the services that you're offering are not going to overwhelm you. And the more focused you are, the less likely it is that that's going to happen. And there's nothing more satisfying. I love it now. We say no now. So I have people call me and they say, we need a postcard or we need something. And then I say, it doesn't make sense for us for this and this and this reason. Or they call us and they say, we need a graphic designer to do an identity. And I say, you need a freelance designer. That's not really what we do. And then I hang up the phone and I say, I said no. Because for a long time I said yes, yes, yes. Every opportunity that came in the door I wanted to do because I saw it as a sale. So clarity helps you say no.
I understand, but consistency means to give the same message over and over in the same with the same message. But if a company is new, you can modify the message slightly, or you can change the color in the website that you don't like. That's okay to do, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think those things you notice more than anyone else, and we tend to get bored of. You might have something that you're doing over and over and it feels stale to you, but it's actually not stale to someone who's seeing it because they're not paying nearly as much attention to it as you are. Yes?
So I'm just curious about why you decided to do the wraparound.
Yes. And how it doesn't work on digital applications?
Well,
yeah.
The business.
So why did we do that?
Yeah.
I did that because I like tactile in design solutions. So whether that's this is a sticker that gets physically applied to it. We think dimensionally, so I like something that reflects that dimensional approach that we take. So that made sense for me. And again, I mean, the company was established 6 years ago. So that's, today if I was doing it, I might do something that's a little bit different. But I think this has some staying power for us. The one miss is that actually if you come around and you look over here, you'll see it wraps around the back of this. So it's yeah, for me, that's part of the way that we look at solutions. There's another company here that is in the. These guys are in the business of simplifying data. The company's called MakePlane. That's not a name we came up with. That's their own name. But one of the things that we did with their business cards is we incorporated the old school printing look. Where remember anyone who used to have my first printer in university used to create the words by dots, and then you have to peel off the side pages, and then so we were having some fun with that because just the business that they're in. And the main reason that we did that was that the owner, when he came to us, he had this great big business card, and he said, Julie, whatever you do, don't change the size of the card because people love that. I give them my card and they go, oh, it's so big. And, and I said to him, Gary, they get it. You know what they do with that card? They fold it and then they put it into their thing, and they're annoyed that it doesn't fit. Now we often scan our cards, but this gave that dimensional conversation piece, and you can peel it off. You can peel it off and have a smaller card, or you can keep it on, but it's a nice conversation piece, and that's what we like to do. And we like to do one thing like that. We don't do multiples. So we wouldn't want to do this and have a varying color palette, or we want to keep it simple, keep it elegant. Any final questions?
On the simplicity thing, how do you? I don't know if this question is, but how do you compete against all the other logos that are out there while keeping it simple?
Because you're not competing on your logo, you're competing on that why. And if you are connected to your why, and you are building your business based on what it is that differentiates you as opposed to the expected capabilities, then I think that's where you see that success. Simplicity in your logo just helps you. It's more memorable. But I don't think it's necessarily going to be the thing that wins business for you.
I'd love to hear, you started telling us about how you found the building and how you started off with the product line. At what point, how long were you into the business when you moved to refocus yourself really on the strategy?
Sure, ongoing process for sure. And I would say officially 4 years in, we started to move away from, because we had lots of sales in that area, but sales are not profit and sales are not satisfaction. Right. So for me, if I got the call about, oh, we're having a conference and we need a really fantastic gift, I would just think, oh, snoozeville, I don't want to do that. But in the earlier days, I actually found that stimulating and exciting, and I wanted to do that. So that's been really in the last 3 years that we've been phasing that side of our business out, and this year we are focused on the brand strategy and brand development work.
Did you have a partner at first, or just a partner in the building?
No, I have a partner in the building who has nothing to do with my business.
And how do you look to your team to shape where you're going? Is it you? Are you mentored, or?
Well, that's a great question. In terms of mentoring and advisory, I mentioned for me, I belong to EO, which is great. There are all sorts of other organizations that are similar to EO that can provide that. When you're launching, I mean, I think there's one here at MaRS that, yeah. And then there's an organization called WEC, Women Entrepreneurs of Canada, that's great. I'm just thinking specifically for women. There's Company of Women, which is a really great tool. Ladies Who Launch is another one. But I definitely think finding that advisory board model, or connecting yourself to other entrepreneurs who are at a similar stage is absolutely critical, and that's been fantastic for me. And at different times I do rely on my staff, and I do confide. My poor husband has to put up with, oh, one thing that's funny I didn't mention about my husband is he has an office in my building now. Yeah.
Does he pay rent?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He has a startup that he's, so he's got this office. So today when I was leaving, he said, oh, okay, see you later, good luck. He said, don't make too much fun of me.
That's great.
All right, well, thank you. Thanks for having me today.